Welcome to With You Podcast.
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David.
And I'm Tara.
And I'm feeling boundary.
You're feeling boundary. Yeah, that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I thought it would be fun to have like a little bit of play, like what boundaries have you noticed in your life? But I think this is going to be a little more heavy one.
Yeah, well, it's just a place we thought we needed to go after we talked about, seasons ago, we talked about the top 10 things that are like you're looking for in love.
Yeah.
And then last week we talked about some myths about relationships.
Yep.
And we've heard from some people that they'd like to hear like, well, what are the deal breakers or what are some red flags? What are the things I'm looking for that would warn me?
Yeah. And we have idea. We're not going to give like a red line boundary, right? I mean, we're going to talk about red flags and we're going to talk about when you might want to think about stepping back or at least getting help, but it's going to differ for each person. There's guidelines. Boundaries are guidelines.
Yeah, well, and I'd say this isn't just for romantic relationships. I'd say some of them are a little bit specific to a couple relationship, but some of them might be really applicable in a friendship or any relationship.
I can tell you a story about that for today.
Okay, it's for today.
Yeah, it just happened. So I was going to meet a friend to have a conversation about work, and I saw a friend I hadn't seen in a long time, and he was at this restaurant having a business meeting, and I came up behind him.
What did you do? What did you squeeze?
I grabbed him and he recoiled a little bit. And the guy, I didn't know the man he was having a business meeting with. And as soon as I grabbed him, I'm like, oh, I think this probably is not a great idea. And because I violated their boundary of having a conversation that I wasn't invited to, and I violated his physical space.
Yeah, I'd say that's one that you're still learning.
But my friend goes, is that Van Dyke?
Well, at least you're consistent.
He didn't see me. And I was like, later on, I'm like, he came and talked with me because he had to finish up his business meeting. And he goes, yeah, it's weird that if anybody grabs me from behind where I don't see them, my first thought is it's you. And I was like, oh, was that inappropriate? He's like, no, I've missed you. And that's like, oh, that's nice. So I do get some positive reinforcement for violating social norms because boundaries can be social norms.
Yeah. And they fall into lots of categories, emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, what else?
Relational boundaries, financial boundaries.
Yeah.
Whatever you can think about there's a line between you and someone else, there's a boundary there.
Yeah. Do you think there are any times in your life where you've had to set a boundary?
Yes.
For someone else?
Yeah. Hairstylists.
I don't know what that is about you.
That's a boundary. I am not okay with them. Well, because I don't have enough hair.
So tell
anyway.
us, what is that boundary?
I don't like haircuts.
You don't like people touching your head?
Nope, just you.
I mean, I know that was kind of a weird thing when we first started dating.
Well, let's not label it in terms of value.
Nobody else insisted that I cut their hair every time. Somebody who had never cut hair before.
You made me look great, except for there was just one time where I regretted that decision. We were living in California.
I thought that would end it.
We were in California and we were going to become members of this church. And I'm like, I need to tidy up. And
we had to go up in front of the whole 3,000 member
church.
Congregation.
Yeah.
And yeah,
and
I was still cutting your hair every time. And up until then, because I didn't have any experience, I spent an excruciatingly long time period with scissors and a comb trying to sort of get a fade or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. I was just trying to make it look all right with scissors. Like it would be like going out and cutting our lawn blade by blade. It felt like that. I think you were like, here, just try using the clippers. And I was so scared of the clippers. For good reason.
Right.
And you said, I need it really short on the side. So you don't need a guard on it. You just
Yeah, you
just do
just
it close
gently.
enough. You just swipe it up. And so I did that and shaved this, mowed down this huge bald swath down the side of your head.
Yeah.
And I like immediately started freaking out, sweating, saying, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
And I thought you were just goofing around. So I thought you were kidding. And I'm like, ha ha ha. And then I went and looked in the mirror and I'm like, I had a moment. There was like a beat.
There was a pause.
And then I was like, well, let me fix that.
No, you just said, well, I guess you might as
Got to
well
do
do
the
all
other
of it.
side. Yep. And so you gave me a tight cut on the other side too. And
Yep.
but yeah, that was
And
probably
somehow you still let me cut your hair.
yeah. I'm the outcome. I'm not really worried about, but that would be a boundary. Beyond that,
No,
I'm
but I
not
don't even think that counts. I'm talking about more of an emotion. That's not really, that's a
an
preference.
emotional
That's
boundary.
not like telling, I think you have. I think we didn't talk about this, so it's
Yeah.
hard on the spot and
Well,
we don't really want to name friends, but like an emotional boundary where you've had to say, or end a friendship because it's just not,
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean?
It's not mutual. So there have been times there hasn't been mutual connection and having to just say, I think we need to go separate ways. I think this needs to
Do you ever get that direct? Have you ever said that to a friend? Like, I
yeah,
think we need
I
to
think the one we're thinking
just
about,
not.
yeah, we and at school at the university, I
Mhm.
am really good at helping people determine a different path for their life. So being able to go, yeah, I don't think this is for you. I think you need to go a different direction.
Yeah.
Directness, I think, is kind.
Yeah.
It's hard
It's
and
just not
painful.
done often, I think,
No.
especially with friends.
And
And
people experience that as a boundary violation. Being
mhm.
honest and
Right.
straightforward can be experienced as aggression or
Mhm.
as intrusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know, yeah, I've had that experience where you've been shocked where I say things to people and you're like,
Yeah, I mean, you
oh.
don't have any trouble knowing where other people's boundaries should be. I think that's part
I'm
of your
I'm
profession.
a giver.
I think for me, where I've encountered it the most acutely, where I'm really thinking hard about where should this boundary be, is more like trying to figure out where somebody else's boundary is that maybe they're not telling me.
Yeah.
Like having in-laws, like having our daughters-in-law, who are both
Yeah.
very kind, sweet, lovely members of our family. But I know how mothers-in-law are talked about by a
Yeah.
lot of people as being intrusive or,
I just
you
heard
know,
a new term for a mother-in-law.
monster-in-law. Yeah,
Monster-in-law.
somebody recently
Said that.
described their mother-in-law that
Not
way,
your
and I thought,
daughter-in-laws.
oh, now it hurts me even more when I hear mothers talked about that way. But it does make me very, very aware of all of my actions, even if they're intended in loving ways, because I hear people talking about in-laws, especially
Yeah.
as because it's a different family system, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a misunderstanding. Sometimes it's actually a true violation and a true
Yeah.
intentional
Yeah.
kind of aggressive
And
thing.
it's based on the relationship. So I think you and I have different spaces for boundaries with others. Like I think it is a professional hazard and just who I am that I see sometimes those boundaries that are too far out as challenges rather than something to be respected. And I think you are on the other end. You're probably very, very cautious.
Yeah.
So
So if
I'm
it,
reckless and you're cautious
yeah,
around
I
boundaries.
think that's true. And if there's a line, I think in all areas of your life, you
Yeah.
love to put your toes over the line and
Just
see what
dabble.
happens, see
Yeah.
if it
Yeah.
can move. I tend to keep my toes far away from it and, you know,
Yeah.
worry too much about crossing that line. So to define a boundary then,
Yeah.
it's like it is a line, it can be seen as a line from like where you can and can't go in a
Right.
relationship, what's okay, what's not okay for you to exist in a healthy way in that relationship.
Yeah, I think it's like the difference between walls that keep people out and doors that there's access, but there's also privacy. So
Mm,
there's a little bit more of a permeable aspect to boundaries, but
mhm.
they're there to say what's me, what's not me, and what's safe and what's not safe. And sometimes people put boundaries to keep things in, not just keep things out.
Mhm.
So there's healthy boundaries are really about building up and making the other feel valued. And so I probably have to attend to that a little bit better. But it hasn't been a big problem in my life.
Well, I think because you also have some discernment about the people who you can kind of push the line with. You usually already have some kind of relational equity with them. You're not just coming up to strangers behind them and giving them a hug from behind.
No, that would
Like,
be strange.
yeah, right. So like
There's relational
there's
equity.
definitely different rules and limits for different
Friendships.
friendships, different relationships, different levels of intimacy
Yeah.
that's going to change. Like, I think it's even different if I'm in a committed relationship with you. Obviously, where our boundaries are going to look different because we're committed to a lifetime together. So we're
Yeah.
going to work out a lot more stuff that might end an acquaintance relationship because
Yep.
I don't need to do the heavy lifting
Right.
of
It's
working
just
that
like
out. It's just like, you know what,
done.
this is
Not worth it.
yeah,
Economy, right?
yeah,
It's kind of an economy of like, is the investment worth the relational commitment?
yeah.
And yeah, and I think it's also the person's experience. Like I might think a boundary is one place, but also being respectful. Like I can usually tell with this friend, I knew he didn't mind physical contact and the surprise was funny. So all of that worked out okay. But
Hmm.
other friends I would never do that with,
No.
even though we're very close, because it would wreck their business or it would make them feel very uncomfortable and throw them off. And that's not it's about play and kind of teasing versus trauma.
Right, right.
And
Well, and
so,
it's hard to know where that line is because
yeah,
it is different for different people.
right.
And for some people, it's harder to have that sort of discernment and that attunement that can take some practice.
Well, we had that. You thought you would be my buddy. Did we talk about this before?
I don't know. What do you mean?
When we were newly married.
Oh,
You
that's
you thought
yeah,
the
we
boundary
told
of
that story. I
playfulness.
tried to play like one of your like dorm mates and play
Yeah,
pranks on you, and you made it very clear that was a boundary.
that
We
was a
weren't going to have
boundary.
that kind of relationship. I
Yeah,
wasn't going to jump out from hiding places and scare
no, or
you.
dump cold water on me in the shower or any of those things.
It was fun while it lasted.
Yeah, and we moved on. We grew out where our
Yeah.
boundaries are.
Yeah, so they're like rules and limits like that the person needs like that I would need to set to the people I'm in relationship to know where I can go, it's safe for me. You can't really set them for other people.
No,
But I think they come out of like what is a healthy relationship. So we've kind of set up our red flags and possibly some deal breakers
yep,
based on sort of the dark side of what the ideal thing is that we're looking for in a healthy relationship. Then what would be the other side of that, the other side of the coin, the part where it's gone,
too injurious, too dehumanizing, too painful.
yeah, kind of the opposite.
So our idea, boundaries keep us safe. So I like thinking about either fences, walls, or guardrails like on the road. I love that because we were just driving in a more mountainous area, and when you have a big
When
cliff
you've
on one
got like
side,
200-foot drop to the
yeah,
side of the road,
and there's no guide rail there, you feel very anxious, and the process of driving is so dysregulating.
yeah.
But when there's a guide rail there, you're still concerned, but there's a little sense of safety, like, oh, I know where the edge of the road is because I can see the boundary.
Yeah, and also if you scrape up against it, it's still gonna be a little harmful,
Yeah,
but it's not gonna be catastrophic
right.
because it bumps you back into the road, not into the cliff.
Yeah. And so you're able, or yeah, down. And so I think that's what we want to talk about is this idea of boundaries are healthy. In the marriage and family therapy literature, there's rigid boundaries that have no flexibility. There's diffuse boundaries, which don't really hardly exist. You don't know where the boundary is. It's hard to see. And then there's permeable boundaries that allows things to pass through, but also holds a sense of safety. And so when we think about it, there's a continuum from kind of rigid to permeable to diffuse. And everybody's going to fall on that differently based on the families you grew up in, the cultural norms, all of these things. And so as we talk about these, we're going to be talking about continuums, but we're going to think about the extremes of those and give some suggestions. But you need to kind of determine for your own relationship where the line is.
Right. And that's the hard thing about this is we tried to think what are some absolute non-negotiable deal breakers. And the truth is it can look really different in different situations.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to talk about some things that are pretty much universal, but also situationally different for different people. So,
Yeah, and I'm going to say this again later, but if there's a red flag, probably the first thing is talk to trusted other to get
uh-huh.
some feedback, whether that's a therapist, a friend.
Well, and I would even refine that even farther,
Oh,
like
good.
a trusted other who cares about the relationship,
Yeah,
doesn't just care just for you or just for the person you're in relationship, like that won't take sides as much as really
yeah,
care about the relationship,
yeah.
but also like will give you good advice.
I think that is great. So, um, yeah, as with all these things, it depends, which is great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but I think people know if you're hearing something that sounds like this rings a bell, or this is just telling me maybe I need to look more
yeah,
deeply into this, or maybe this thing that I thought was like a good thing or that we grow out of maybe is more serious than I thought.
yeah,
So yeah, so we're gonna link in our show notes to our top 10 things that we've learned about love, which is kind of like we took it from all of our marriage interviews and from what we've learned about what makes a lasting relationship.
yeah,
And we're going to structure these red
yeah.
flags off the opposite of those. So we'll link to that one.
No, that sounds
Um,
fun.
yeah, super fun.
Yeah. Well, with all things, we should start with God.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the number one thing we thought was important in a healthy relationship for us, it looks like being anchored to God. Um, but it can also just be like being anchored to your support network, being anchored to something bigger than yourself, having a
Yeah.
relationship exist in a place that's not just you and me against the world, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah. I think of this because in church settings, when we talk to people about relationships, they're like, well, we want to make God the center. And it's like, yes, that's great. And it can be problematic. So God is a center that drives you towards each other in a deeper connection and deeper knowing of Him and each other. Great. The couple that, like you and I, if we're having a fight and I'll just depend on God. Then I use God as an escape from us having the difficult conversations. And
Hmm.
so the boundary is, yes, our relationship is bigger than us. And the thing that's bigger should drive us together in a
Right.
meaningful, intimate, building up way.
Yeah. So, like, the ideal thing is a couple should be connected to their why, to the thing that's bigger than them, their community, their friends. So, for us, the first red flag would
Yeah.
be if there's isolation, if the person you're with is wanting to cut you off from your family, from whether there or not there's a good reason.
Yeah.
It's been described to as a good reason, or you think it's a good reason. The more that isolation starts to happen, the more there's a concern.
Yeah. So if it's just one person, that's something. But if you're slowly being removed from all of your social support network, and you're being seen as just, this is just the only relationship in my life, that's the isolation we're talking about. And that leads to really high risk things.
Yeah. So it's like the red flag would start with, okay, we're going to move away from everybody or we're going to, I don't want you going out with your friends,
Yeah. Without me.
or who's that calling? I need to hear who's calling, and when it gets farther down the road and it's a deal breaker, it's when there's, you're not even attached to you don't have a cell phone, or you're really getting cut off from outside communication.
Yeah. No way to reach anyone else
It seems
it
obvious,
happens, but
but it can happen like gradually until
yeah.
you don't really realize that you're that disconnected from the people who really know you and
Yeah.
support you.
Yeah, it's a slow creep. And so being able to have vibrant relationships,
Yeah.
even in marriage or in a committed relationship one thing that's great for us is our relationship builds us up together. And it's because of the love we have from God, and it frees us up to love others.
Yeah.
And it would be a problem if it was like, oh no, you can't hang out with anyone else.
Yeah. I mean, it can happen in a friendship too. I know friendships that have said, I can't have you be friends with anybody else. Like any of that kind of cutting off
Yep.
is not a healthy thing. And just say, I was meant to say this before we started on these. the person who is the violator of the boundaries is not the person that's going to see themselves in this. Like
Right.
listening to this, it's the people who feel violated or the need to create boundaries that are going to kind of be able to understand this and
Yeah.
maybe kind of build some better fences.
Yeah, feeling anxious, feeling overwhelmed, and we're talking about right now, talking about what's the big picture, and feeling isolated. It's like, well, yeah, that cutoff is from a place of fear
Mhm.
and needing to join in with others to have a conversation. And I love that idea that you said of talk to somebody that is committed to both of you are committed to the relationship. Because I think I would get a bit reactive if it was one of our kids or something. I
Mhm.
wouldn't be the most helpful, observable person.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
objective.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, so sometimes there's a way to address it in a way that brings healing and repair, but if it's not, if the person is not willing to address it, it might be something that leads to being a deal breaker.
yeah,
Yeah, and that may be a process. So, we really advocate for you finding support, somebody that really, really that you trust and
yeah.
that can guide you to professional help.
Yeah, and I feel like every one of these, I'm going to say couples therapy, and because we have at the clinic, we have an MFT clinic, a marriage and family therapy clinic at the university, and we've had college roommates come in
Yeah.
because they felt some of these danger red flag kind of things in there living together and working it out, and it was brilliant. I was like, you four are the bravest and smartest people I
Yeah,
know.
I thought that was brilliant too, that roommates would say, "Hey, we're stuck living together. Let's go to like a couples therapist
Yeah.
and people who know how to work out things between people in a group."
Yeah, it was remarkable, and it was really beneficial. Afterwards, they lived with each other for another 2 years, and it was just really encouraging. They came back and told us, which you don't always get. They're
That's
like, "Hey,
nice.
that was really helpful because we were all falling apart, wanting to be in the apartment by ourselves, and so there's almost a self isolation too that
Mm.
was eating away at them." So I'm always going to say, get some professional help. It doesn't have to take a long time.
No, and sometimes it's just to tweak patterns that have gotten a little off, off track.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that you're already in crisis.
Right.
Yeah, so let's move on to number 2, or we're never gonna get
Number
there.
2.
So we started with, the thing on our list of things that you do look for are prioritizing the relationship, and I lumped several together. We also said serve your spouse or your friend, choose love every day. So basically that this relationship is a choice. I choose to be in relationship with you. I'm going to make it a priority in my life is
Yeah.
what we're looking for. And so there can be some dark sides to that too
Yeah.
when that's all the other person wants,
Right.
and so much of a commitment that's just like dependency or, a neediness that's not a choosing. It's like a needing that feels suffocating.
Oh yeah. I know you've always wanted me to say I'm wanting you, I like you, but not I need you, because it crosses a line.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
becomes something that is required rather than a desire for connection. And I think with this kind of one thing that's helpful is to ease some of the pressure on the relationship. Is we were talking with an economist professor today, and he said, I'm not a marriage expert, but it seems like the takeaway is you prioritize the relationship and you remove the exits, and then you have to work it out.
Yeah.
And it was pretty spot on. And it kind of goes to this of like, are we committed to this relationship?
Yeah. And is there balance there? Is that commitment kind of an equal load? Because often in a couple or a friendship or even a business partnership,
Yeah.
it can feel like one person is carrying so much more
Uh,
of the emotional load or, whatever it
yeah.
is than,
Responsibility.
yeah, than the other person. And that can lead to some real trouble. And it could just be a season or it could be a true, like the one person is disconnected, is really not that committed, and so it's figuring out like, are you in this?
Yeah.
Like, are we really in this? Is there a point at working at this? Is this just a red flag that you're not really in this? Are we keeping score?
Yeah,
That's another red flag.
earning your love.
Like, maybe I'll choose to love you if you earn it, if you do this, or if you do enough to please me.
Yeah.
That's definitely a red flag.
Well, and that earning and over functioning often comes from a place of the person requiring that has had some very painful family history that
Mhm.
you're not good enough if, and so you've internalized that, and that becomes part of this relationship. I have to overfunction. I have to do these things to earn your love.
Mhm.
And that then becomes a relational dance that's unbalanced, and then you get angry about it too.
Right.
And so how do we work at this mutual give and take?
So, yeah, I think you say, and this might be true for all of these, is the first step is like finding out what's the core of this, like what's the
Hmm.
root cause. Because sometimes it doesn't mean this relationship isn't going to work at all. It means maybe you are living in kind of a trauma response.
Hmm.
And if we address it and really get some help for it, it might really bring growth and connection. But if it's something more, more direct or like intentional
Yeah,
or
malicious.
malicious or a true total disconnect, that might be different.
Yeah, and it's the root cause is kind of how have we formed this balance, and can
Mm,
we do it differently? And if we're stuck, then it's going, oh, we need someone to help us unstick this. And like we talk about, there's usually a need, and then there's some kind of rules. And so today we're talking about the boundary part is the rules of relationship, our family rules, societal rules, faith rules, and how do we meet the need within the rules is what we're looking at specifically today. The boundaries are what's the rules for our relationship.
mhm.
I mean, for us, we prioritize our relationship of we don't often kind of get rides from opposite gender colleagues or friends, not because it's wrong, but it's because we're prioritizing our relationship and
Mhm.
saying this is the dance
And
that we
that's a
want to do.
deliberate boundary of just saying, I'm not going to open the door to building this strong, intimate, emotional connection with somebody else
Yeah.
because I prioritize that with you.
Yep.
And not meaning I'm getting all my needs met from you, but I'm not going to open the door to,
An escape.
an escape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and that's going to look different for each couple. For us,
Mhm.
that's where we draw the line. The question is, are you drawing a line?
Mhm.
Are you prioritizing? What is that line? This is us.
Mhm.
And then these are other things. And it's not that it's not a good thing or not an okay thing, but we're prioritizing that we're going to remove that from any potential boundary violation. It's easier to build a fence at the top of the cliff than be an ambulance at the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're talking about here. How do you set up boundaries rather than if you fall off the cliff, then here's what the red flags are and here's the problem. So let's go on to number 3.
Okay.
Support each other's growth.
Yeah.
You do that through baking.
All right. I don't love that joke, but yes, we do see, like, in a really thriving, healthy relationship, whether it's a friend or a family member, anything, that you support each other in your
Yeah.
growth. You don't expect them to stay the same. You support their dreams, their professional, personal growth, and that's something I think we've always done for each other that
Yeah.
really feels like we can thrive because we can be an individual, we can grow individually, um, and sometimes we have to take turns,
Yeah.
like with professional development and stuff. But supporting each other in that is huge. So the other side of that, kind of the red flags, is obviously if you're not feeling supported or encouraged, if you're feeling like in your relationship you bring up a dream and it gets shot down right away, if you're feeling super discouraged or that person gets really jealous when you have success,
Yeah.
that's a red flag to
Yeah.
me.
And then the more malicious side is being knocked down and discounted and trashed,
Or
right? I mean,
sabotaged.
yeah, or convinced you're less than. So
Mhm.
the opposite of building up is really that tearing down, whether it's tearing down through words, tearing down through resources. Um, yeah, that's the further extent of the getting into the deal breakers
Mhm.
of I really worry about couples where they're really tearing each other down to such an extent I don't see any togetherness.
Mhm.
It almost becomes the way that they're connected is through tearing each other down. And I would challenge people. I haven't seen couples necessarily do this directly with each other, but I have heard in groups of men talking about their wives and tearing them down. And so it's not even in person, but it can be separate
Behind the
of,
scenes.
yeah,
Yeah.
are you building up? How do you talk about your partner when they're not there, your
Yeah.
friends when they're not
Or
there?
friends, yeah, because I think that's tricky even in friend groups. I think we are competitive people, but I think with each other we do
Really?
it I
Yeah.
think we do it playfully. Like even with like whose solo
Hmm.
podcast has gotten more listens.
Yeah.
But in a relationship, in a couple or in a friendship, it can be destructive if that person is really blocking you or really trying to discount anything that you're doing that's leading to your growth.
Right.
And I
If
see that in friendships, like, but just a little competitiveness, like really not being happy for that person when they have some success or struggling with that. That can be tough to keep a friendship going if you have to hide your success because they can't be supportive. And it shows maturity when somebody can really raise you up, even if they're feeling like, they're not there yet.
Yeah, don't you think, I think sometimes in more conservative faith cultures, like women specifically have to build up their husband, is the cultural message. And
I was wondering where you were going there.
it's not a mutual building up. So I've seen that a lot where
You
it's
mean
like,
the little like archetype of the supportive woman in a long skirt standing beside her husband and saying, "Yes, dear, good job, dear,"
yeah,
sort of that like trope.
or even in like a church hires a pastor and they get a pastor plus another worker, which is the spouse, but the
Who's
spouse doesn't
unpaid?
get paid.
Yeah,
And so it's kind of this unequal kind of building up. It's a together, we're doing this together, but it's
yeah,
also like unbalanced sometimes.
yeah. Sure. I don't know how that fits with like a red flag.
Well, I think we can get caught in that. So it's the trajectory of the cultural conversation is this is what it means to be a good husband or this is what it means to be a good wife, and it sets you up for, if you're not careful, further boundary violations of not building both of each other up together mutually.
Okay.
So that's my thought on that.
All right.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah,
move
so
on.
so number 4 is what sometimes we really need from each other is some little space. And we think
We
that's a
do that.
healthy thing. It's a healthy thing.
We do that so well.
Yeah, we think it's a really healthy thing to have together time and space apart. I think where it gets tricky for friendships and couples is like when one wants more together time and one wants more space. What's the balance of agreed upon shared time together
Yeah,
and agreed upon time apart, and finding the place where both partners feel safe and supported in those, you know,
definitely.
in those things.
And the coming back together. So the positive boundary is you're in agreement how much time separate and supporting each other and coming back together. It's the coming back together that's important. I think the red flags are here if we're not giving space, intrusion, like
Right.
when I threatened you with my retirement plan, what's going to be, you were going to be my hobby. And you're like, that's intrusive.
Yes. Yes.
And you're like, I don't think you're going to retire, David. And I'm like, oh, that's
I think
fair.
we always need something productive to do.
But I think that's the kind of thing of, and it depends on where you are in your life development, your relationship development. Early on, it's going to be a lot of time together.
Yeah, and early on, you're testing that. You're seeing like, do we like hanging out? Do we trust each other when we're not apart? Like you're figuring that out where those lines are.
Yeah,
So that looks very different. It probably looked very different for us when we were
yeah,
2 years married versus 33 years married.
yeah,
Just feeling safe of where those places are and knowing that it's a good thing if
yeah.
we have
We
this much time apart, but it can be dangerous. The time we spent a month apart, we
yeah.
realized we're not doing that again.
No, that was horrible.
Yeah, it didn't feel good for us individually or together.
Yeah. But having space and supporting, like, you need to see sunshine, and so encouraging you to travel when there's no sunshine. What months are those? I don't even
But
know.
where do I travel to that has more sun?
Well, that's not, yeah, I don't know about that, but I think that intrusive behavior is a red flag. I think tracking, like with technology, this has
Mm.
become a whole new red
It
flag.
is a whole new territory because,
But we do that. We track each other.
well, we
Is that a
just
red flag?
started that like a couple years ago for safety, and I think we've mentioned this before, but when, with my work, it was truly
Yeah, you
just a
would
little
get,
dangerous sometimes when I was in the city at 2 o'clock in the morning and, just needed you to wake up and know where I was.
yeah.
And I did tell you where the line was because I think you looked on the app one time and it told you how fast I was driving. And I said, we're not doing that.
There's the
We're
line.
going to disable that part of the app.
That was intrusive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
we
we
did.
agreed on that.
We agreed upon that.
But I have heard some stories recently of, when families all have the Find My Phone or whatever,
Yeah.
that I've heard from some people whose in-laws track them and will say, "Oh, hey, I see you're at the grocery store. Can you pick me up something?" Or like constantly tracking. That is mind-blowing to me and
Yeah.
seems really far into the intrusion
Well, that would be a boundary
category.
boundary violation for
Right? And
us.
then the person who is being tracked feels like it's a really hard thing to have that conversation because
Yeah.
it's acceptable in that family system. And how do you name that boundary? That's probably something we should address. Like, how do you approach that with
Well,
somebody who thinks that's totally normal?
I don't have a serious answer. I have a funny answer. So you get a burner phone and you just leave your
You
other
leave it
phone
somewhere.
somewhere, like,
You put it on
really.
a delivery truck somewhere.
Yeah, let it. You mail it to Amazon and have it travel all around, and
Oh boy.
so that was my first thought. Is like, well, we're going to teach people a lesson. That's
Yeah.
not the
Not
healthiest
not
response.
no.
No, I think being able to talk about, like, is this for safety? What's the purpose of this? I mean, we talk about this kind of not tracking intrusion, but you're on call all the time,
Mhm.
and so your phone is on all the time, and people can make the naughty list,
Mhm.
calling at early in the morning or texting early or late at night when you might have missed 2 nights of sleep.
Mhm.
And then a text of just like thinking about you, is really sweet, but it's also an intrusion.
Mhm.
And so having to figure out when to turn off and turn on technology and how to
Yeah.
communicate it, of telling the in-laws, telling your partner, like you did with me. You know what? Tracking my speed driving, not okay.
Yeah, and you
That's
responded well to that.
Yeah, and you said that's between me and God. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's back to the trust. Like, do I trust you? Because a lot of the tracking is anxiety that I don't trust you.
Well, I don't think it's always about trust because I think a lot of parents who track their children or sometimes spouses who track each other, it might be about convenience, like or safety or something like other than just not trusting them. It might not be that at all. And our kids, we didn't have. I don't think we had that technology. I didn't know
We
about it
didn't do
when
it.
we
Yeah.
didn't choose to do it, but when they were in college, when we got that app, we gave them an opt-in. Like, if you'd like to, the only one who opted in was our daughter, and mostly because she could know when I was home, so she could come do her laundry.
Yeah. She wanted to track us.
Mostly we forget we have that, but it's also been handy in just when I'm waiting for her to come home and it's late, and I want to know, like, is she on the way or not? I do a quick look and I see, oh, she's at her friend's house. I can fall asleep. I'm fine.
Yeah.
So it's helpful in that way, but it can be definitely misused, and especially if it's a double standard too. I think that would be a big red
Yeah.
flag.
Like, you only track me in my driving, but I don't get to track you in your
Right,
driving.
right. If it's I can go out with my friends every night of the week, but you can't,
Yeah.
or something like that with the space,
Yeah.
like different rules for different folks.
So this is just an idea, because there's a therapeutic approach that I think about, and there's a thing called relational experiments. And to see if this is a boundary violation or struggle for you or not, you can have a relational experiment as a family of, we're going to turn off the tracker for 24 hours over the weekend or weekday, and see if you're not able to tolerate that reactivity, then there's something going on that you need. There's a fear, there's a distrust,
Mm,
there's a inconvenience that is kind of stimulating a neurobiological response that's
Mhm.
not okay. And so being able to do these little experiments with yourself of going tech free for a day or a week can be helpful to let you know, is this a problem or not?
Yeah. Well, and the studies have shown that the more we can know about each other, the more we can track things, the higher the anxiety is. I think about new parents who have those monitors they can put on their babies that tell them if their breathing stops, or
Yeah.
which is done, in the interest of safety, but it can actually increase the anxiety because you're attending to it so much,
Yeah.
and there can be false alarms, and so I think the more we increase that anxiety, the more we feel like we need the data,
Yeah.
and then that just increases.
Well, you see that in births, right? The more you monitor something, the more it changes behavior. And
Mhm.
so, all right, well, good. So we want to work on giving
Giving
space.
space
And
and feeling like you're supported and having space.
you know what? I just noticed I love us because we're trying to talk about boundaries and violations and red flags, and we still end up with the positive of like, yeah, just give each other space. So we're covering both
Well,
sides
I
of it.
think I went at it from this perspective or this angle because it's like, here's what we want. And so it's kind of the measuring line too of like
Yeah.
why there's a boundary sometimes. If what we're looking for is to trust each other and to feel free enough to give each other space and together time, when that's out of balance, that's the first red flag. When it
Yeah.
feels like if you were upset at me every time I wanted to go out with my friends, we'd have to go, okay, what's going on? Are we not spending enough time together? Are you feeling afraid? Did I violate something? Did I betray you once? And that's
Yeah.
we'd have to get to what's going on here. It just is that first warning light.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Let's go to number 5.
Yeah. So the ideal would be to communicate to each other with honesty and kindness.
Yeah. We talked about that at the beginning. I love being honest and kind and direct. We should have direct there too.
Well, that's maybe a how. Um, Yeah,
But
so I guess what we're looking for, the question you ask yourself is, am I treated with respect when we talk? It
yeah,
doesn't mean everything's going to always be soft and gentle and
no.
perfectly positive, but am I respected?
Yeah. And am I getting activated? Like, am I aware of what's going on for me? Can I be a non-anxious presence in our interaction? Slow
Yeah.
down,
And when it
take a
does
breath.
raise up like that, can we take a break? Like, are we able to regulate so that it doesn't escalate? So, I mean, I think this one is the most clear thing that people would probably understand when this is being violated. Like, is the person talking to you with criticism and blame all the time? Is
Yeah.
it feeling like there's always sarcasm or passive aggression, or,
Now, is sarcasm really a bad thing?
well, it's your love language, so it can't be.
It no, Gary said it's not my love language. But yeah, no, sarcasm can be hurtful. And
Yeah,
it's,
it can be playful, but it can also cut
yeah,
if it's used that way.
yeah. So I think, yeah, if you're experiencing, oh, this interaction is painful, and
Yeah.
it's not a like honest, painful, like, oh, this is something I have to look at, but it's like, I'm always feeling crappy after interacting with
Mm,
you. That's something to think about that they're not necessarily building you up, and it's not honest and kind.
right. Yeah, because honesty, can be cutting too.
Yeah.
It's the how, it's with kindness, gentleness, respect. If you're always feeling like, "Man, I do feel less than, I feel bad about myself every time we have this communication," that's a warning sign, but it can definitely tip into deal breakers where
Yeah.
there and when we see deal breaker, that doesn't always mean like that means it's over. This relationship is over. It might mean that, but to us, it means there either needs to be some separation, some professional help,
Yeah.
probably first,
Yeah.
then maybe some time apart if there's a safety issue, and then possibly complete cutoff if it can't be resolved or it's dangerous. So, like the deal breakers for me in this communication is if it turns into verbal, physical, emotional
Or
abuse
sexual. Yeah.
or sexual abuse, then there needs to be there needs to be an intervention of some sort.
Right. Others need to be brought in. There needs to be a pause. There needs to be attention because the whole thing we know about relationships, if it's not safe, then you shouldn't open yourself up to more vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
because you're putting yourself at greater risk for injury. So, as couples therapists, there needs to be a sense of, oh, you're not escaping through an affair. You're not escaping through violence, all these type of things. Because if that's happening, I'm not going to make the other person more vulnerable because all you're doing is having potential more damage happen.
Yeah.
So having someone come alongside, because sometimes it can be really confusing what that feels like.
Mm.
Because honesty, I can say I'm being honest. And the question is, are you feeling built up or are you feeling torn down and held down? Honesty can have that double-edged sword. I can
Yeah.
be honest with you and it's about breaking you,
Yeah.
or it can be honest with you because I'm seeking a better connection and building you up.
Yeah.
Because I think about that. I give difficult feedback in the therapy process to supervisees, and having to really make sure they experience and hear this is about building you up. This is a growth moment versus tearing you down. You should
Mm-hmm.
never do this. And you can berate someone, that it could be honest, but you're going after them. And
Yeah.
that's the verbal abuse piece.
Yeah.
So if that's happening, definitely if you're having some of this feel familiar to you right now, that's where you need to talk to somebody that's trusted, that will protect you and give you good advice.
Right. And sometimes it can just be the way the system is starting to work between the two of you. So it might just be somebody stepping in and working on some new communication patterns. And but if it's deeper than that, it needs a little more work.
Yeah. And number 6. So
Yeah.
this came from a conversation with a 20-something that helped us think through
Yeah.
this.
Well, I had this on our list, our top 10 lists of things that we think leads to a healthy relationship is kind of expectations, knowing what our expectations are, being clear about that, and we said too, holding expectations loosely as far as like if you have idealism and stuff like that. But in this instance, it's like looking at what am I expecting out of a relationship? Where is that bar? What's my model for a healthy relationship? And I think the red flags can be pretty obvious if somebody's expectations are starting to be set in really unhealthy ways by
Yeah.
pornography or I'm hearing a lot more from women who are getting into really like erotic literature, and so that that whatever it is, the prototype or the stereotype of this dominating man becomes like their what they're looking for.
Yeah.
It's not a healthy model.
Right. It's not building up in mutual. It's one over the other.
Yeah, if any of this is like an
Right.
objectifying kind of a thing where, that person is just kind of there to meet your needs,
Yeah.
it's not a great model for a
No.
healthy relationship.
And that's the expectation. Am I expecting a relationship of give and take, or am I seeing you as just a need gratifying object that you're only there for my needs? That expectation is problematic
Yeah.
and needs attending to, because it's a slippery slope, and that can be lots of different ways. And we can even do it to ourselves. Body image kind
Mhm.
of issues of I'm not meeting up, and so I'm just seeing myself as an object and not as a child of God. And
Mhm.
so this one, the deal breakers are if you're being treated where you're being dehumanized, you're being treated where there's violation, physical or otherwise.
Yeah, or just a person to meet the needs, their
Yeah.
needs. Yeah, that's a deal breaker.
Or being asked to do things against your moral core,
Right.
right? A moral injury is not a building up relationship. And so that's a red flag. And talk to somebody. Don't go through it alone. Don't go through it alone.
Yep. So number 7 kind of goes kind of hand in hand with this is, in a healthy relationship, we want to embrace each other's imperfections. We want to be fully committed to the person for who they are, for
Yeah.
the highs and lows, the good and the bad, the struggles and the good things. And so that, for me, that's kind of a clear thing when you're in a relationship with somebody who makes you feel like you can be whoever you are. You feel like you're your best self when you're with them,
Mhm.
that's a really good sign. If it feels like they're putting these demands on me or requirements on me or wanting me to lose weight or like whatever, it's it's really kind of stepping into they have this picture of who you should be, and you have to meet that in order to be loved.
Yeah. I think, and speak a certain way, behave a certain way, all those expectations that are different than the one we talked about before, but expectations to be a different person.
Yeah, or
Like,
just not being embraced for who you are, can lead into something like more sinister. I mean, this one I've seen tons of times in some of my friends in their relationships, and I'm thinking specifically of one who was a friend of mine in college, and the guy she was dating, they had only been dating for a little while, and he started to say, it's just not you're just not sexy enough for me anymore. I need you to wear more makeup and shorter skirts. You probably
yeah,
remember
yep,
this.
yep, yep, yep.
And it was horrifying to me, and I thought that's, like, the biggest red flag. They've only been dating for a while, and he's needing her to dress differently to make him feel interested, and
Yeah.
it just as you can imagine, it didn't end well. Um,
Yeah, and the deal breakers there were like ridicule, mocking, because there was also mocking when it was like, "Oh, this is fine," and it's just like,
yeah.
and and contempt. So John Gottman talks about one of the relational dangers. He talks about four: criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and this one is contempt, where it's not about what you're doing but who you are.
Mhm.
I feel contempt towards, or I feel disgust towards, is the essence of who you
Mhm.
are, and saying things that way. That's a huge danger in relationship. So with all of these, it would be good probably to go back and revisit Gottman's
Yeah.
work in
I
terms
have
of,
to say this is getting me down because it's hard to I just feel really sad.
well, and but it's kind of like when you're on a flight and they tell all the disastrous things that are going to happen and all the protection. Like, hopefully you don't need it, but it's a resource
No,
there.
but I mean, but the truth is, this happens in relationships
Yeah.
a lot, and humans can treat each other poorly. And sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see out of it. It's hard to see. I've heard so many people say too, I just missed the red flags. And that's why we're talking about it,
Yeah.
because if we highlight something for anyone that says, okay, well, if that's a red flag, maybe I
Talk to
should
somebody.
talk to somebody, I should look more deeply into this, or maybe this relationship isn't meant to happen.
Yeah.
It should build you up. A relationship should make you feel good. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it should feel smooth, as far as you don't have to change yourself.
Which I think leads right into our last one,
Mhm.
number 8, of nurture. The goal is to nurture a friendship. And what
Yeah.
we've experienced in our professional lives and in our relationship, the depth of our intimacy is around friendship and
Mhm.
enjoying each other and finding those places to enjoy each other, because we drive each other nuts. I mean, we both have things that are annoying, but that's not what we spend the most time focused on. It's enjoying the time together and building the curiosity there. So, do I have fun hanging out with this person? The answer is yes. I have a ton of fun hanging out with you.
I mean, that's the core of any relationship, isn't it? Like, do I actually like being in the company of this person?
Hmm.
And if it's always no, like sometimes you need to continue a friendship that feels a little bit draining because there's just a balance thing at that time or something. But
Yeah,
if you always feel drained after being with that person, or it always feels tough, or you always feel worse about yourself, or it's just not enjoyable at all,
yeah.
it's maybe there's something wrong.
Yeah, and that's not it's not that, it just might not be inviting them into the inner circle of your intimate connections.
Yeah.
Like, I have a lot of friendships where, we can see each other off and on, and we like each other, we drive each other crazy, and it's kind of acquaintances or easy friendships.
Mhm.
But that deep, intimate one, this needs to be core of an enjoyment, just a pleasure of
Yeah.
being together. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. And it grows on you. I mean, it goes also to the giving space, right? Like
Mhm.
we enjoy and have fun together because we also have fun other places that feeds into our
Gives us something to
enjoyment.
talk about.
Yeah. And so deal breakers are if you're afraid to hang out with this person because they'll just suck your soul dry. That's a key. Or you just feel gross. You don't feel good about yourself after spending time with them.
Yeah.
Um, that's a problem. And we've all had those experiences.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think sometimes that's, in a friendship, that's an easier deal breaker if you realize, what you've been trying, you've both been trying, but you're just not a good fit anymore, and you're both putting the effort in, but it's not life-giving.
yeah,
That can be the end of a season of a friendship. I think in a couple situation, I think we really need to look at what's going on. If it's that draining in a couple committed relationship, it's probably been bad for a while.
yeah.
And so maybe finding out, if, is the person depressed? Is there something that needs to be addressed with mental health first? But relationships are meant to be life giving at the
Yeah.
core.
And I think the boundary is good. If you can set boundaries, it can start to shift some of these red flags back into the ideal, and more of that. And so the thing is, hey, are you seeing red flags? If you are, setting boundaries can be really, really helpful. And permeable boundaries, not rigid, like distant boundaries, but hey, here's the edge of the mountain cliff.
Mhm.
Like going past here is disastrous.
Mhm.
Let's play within the boundary of this guide rail. That can really free up and have a relational shift. So I find hope in that actually in what we've been talking about. I find hope in boundaries
Mhm.
that I think it's helpful for us.
Yeah, I will say in French, I'm sure there's times I can think of in our relationship beyond the tracking issue, but there's been a couple times in friendships where I've just felt kind of drained in that relationship, and I start to think maybe I want to not hang out with that person anymore. And when I've been brave enough to say, "Hey, look, I feel like this is unbalanced, or this, you've kind of gone into this place that's painful for me," and I've usually found that people have respected that, and actually our relationship gets better
Yeah.
because they didn't know. I was keeping quiet about how much I was not enjoying that in our relationship because I didn't want to harm them. But by letting it happen, I was just letting the relationship kind of die.
Yeah. So it's I'm glad that you had the courage to be honest, right? It goes back up to that communicating with honesty,
Mhm.
and depending on how they responded, then you're going to make a decision. So the boundary was I'm going to set like here's what's important to me and see what
Right.
happens.
And then that's where you tip farther into knowing if it's just a red flag or if it's really time to sort of have some separation. If you name a boundary and tell people where the line is and they keep crossing it and they keep violating it and don't respect it, that becomes kind of a deal breaker.
Yeah. And a fun other little relational experiment is asking your family, someone in the family you grew up in, that you feel safe with, what kind of boundaries did we have in our family? Because sometimes we can't see it ourselves, but
Mhm.
other family members can speak into that because those are our defaults. The family we grew up in, the culture and the community we grew up in, they set boundaries for us. We just don't know that. And if there was no boundaries or very diffuse and we were violated in other ways, it's going to be harder to even know what good boundaries are. So asking someone like, hey, like I'll probably ask Nathan, what do you think boundaries? And we had different experiences of
Yeah.
it, but it's a conversation that we can have that informs our other relationships. My marriage with you, for
Yeah.
instance.
It just was making me giggle when you talked about, culturally, there can be different, like, just norms for where
Yeah.
boundaries are, and I'm thinking about your crossing into people's physical space here,
Oh, nice
and
callback.
no, because I had that mental picture of, like, people have very clearly defined physical sort of bubbles of space in America, I feel.
Yeah.
Um, when you travel to Brazil and
Oh,
they're a very physically close
that was
culture,
remarkable. Yeah.
and it made me laugh so hard that you felt violated, like, you felt like you'd been kissed and hugged too much, and I thought, "That's funny.
Now,
I wonder if that will change your behavior in the US."
I want to say to all my Brazilian friends, I loved all the hugs and
You
kisses.
did.
It was just the 750 hugs and kisses
Yeah.
that it wasn't, it was the quantity.
Right,
And
right, and all in a short time, and it was just a big change
yeah,
from the way people respond here.
right. There was, I mean,
It's culture shock.
I had like makeup thickly on me because of all the physical contact.
That sounds alarming.
It was remarkable. I had forgotten about but yeah, I
They're very
think,
demonstrative, loving people in the Brazilian culture,
yeah,
and it was just funny to see you kind of on the other end of that,
yeah.
of seeing how you felt when your space was
Well, and that discomfort was like, oh, I need to be aware. This is cultural. This isn't an intrusion.
Right.
And it was, and so I think you bring up a really good point of as we look at all these things, we need to be careful of jumping to there's malicious intent by the other.
Right.
Because my Brazilian friends, it was love, man. It was
Mhm.
just all love,
Yeah.
which was lovely but overwhelming. And so
Yeah.
having to navigate, I have a different response to that kind of boundary violation
Mhm.
than if they were trying to break me, right? I mean, the intent is matters. So, well, I hope this has been helpful. You got to hear more about our boundaries and boundary violations than maybe you thought you would.
Yeah, and we just think it's always fun to talk about. I mean, it's not fun, but it's always great to revisit like what are we looking for in a healthy relationship, and how do we know when we're veering into unhealthy kind of boundaries or practices?
Yeah.
And so to help us kind of know how to get help, know when it's time to end something, so that we're flourishing in our connections.
I want to leave them with one positive boundary.
All right.
You can, like, if you want the full experience, you should watch us on YouTube. You can see us interacting, and that's a whole different boundary than just hearing us.
Why is that a boundary?
Well, because like they can picture something in their head, but now they can actually see the full episode by watching us on YouTube or listening and commenting. We'd love to hear from you about how meaningful this was or wasn't, what would be more helpful, and have a conversation. We're inviting that boundary to be crossed.